I can feel it. I can feel the universal consciousness in my soul, in my body. On today's episode of Simply Naturopathic, a higher state of consciousness accessible via structures in the central nervous system, a brief history of mysticism in healing. Can we use this higher power, this higher consciousness for the good of the people? We're going to talk about it in today's episode. Remember, this is not medical advice. This is unprofessional advice. I am still a medical student. But please have a stay. It'll be a great show. And we also might even have some scientific evidence to support some of these ideas. Take it all with a grain of salt in today's episode of Simply Naturopathic with your host, Harold Payne. Yep. So, mysticism and healing, they seem to go hand in hand. And I've always wondered, where is the bridge between the metaphysical and physical, between superstition, pseudoscience, if you will, supernatural phenomenon, and the everyday human experience available to us normal mortals? I've always been interested in that conversation, and today I'm going to tell you everything that I know so far. Mysticism and healing are tied inseparably. Anytime you hear about a mystic in Eastern traditions and Eastern stories, whether they be stories of Jesus from the Bible, stories of Buddha, stories of yogi and Hindu and those who have been enlightened, they always have a pronounced healing prowess, even being able to go so far as to raise the dead. One of my favorite stories is the story of Jesus, of course. And you know Jesus, my man's J-Dog, J.H. Christ, Yeshua. Yo, pull up to the party, bro. What am I saying? There are many stories of him healing people with leprosy, healing the blind, healing, raising the dead. And it all came from his deep connection to God through prayer and fasting and devotion, a lifelong devotion. Although it's interesting because in one story where he goes to heal one woman, it is said that he could only heal her if she had faith in him. I want to touch on that again later when we talk about some modern healing methods that rely on a sort of spiritual prowess like Reiki. I want to touch on that very idea of having faith. But other prominent figures in mysticism and healing, I forget that one woman's name. I always forget her name, but she's like a saint or something. There's this beautiful artistic depiction of her holding a book of herbs and wearing sort of a black and white nun garb. But this woman, there's a story of her receiving a formula for an herbal concoction containing hundreds of different herbs to heal one person who had become sick. And she had received the formula for this from a dream. Of course, we have the stories of Buddha and the yogi who, by balancing their chakras, these 7 centers of energy and consciousness in the human body, by balancing their flow of energy, you can connect with a higher state of consciousness and become enlightened. Now, it's interesting, I hear about these and I always look for some sort of physiological correlation. In the case of dreams, even myself, I've experienced this profoundly. Dreams that seem like a psychedelic trip. I mean, they even have some of the same hallmarks, being able to see the future. I've seen the future many times in my dreams. You may not want to believe it, but I said this ain't medical advice. Just one man's experience in a conversation I invite you to participate in if something like this has happened to you. But if I've seen the future in my dreams. I've had dreams that are straight up like I'm about to blast off into a DMT trip. I'll have sleep paralysis. My whole body will be vibrating, as is characteristic of a breakthrough DMT experience. Mind you, this is all me. I just went to sleep. I didn't have any drugs or anything. And we know the government does experimentation with this sort of thing all the time. You can go to cia.gov/reading room to read declassified experiments about astral projection, telepathy, remote viewing. These things, I believe they are all very real, and I would love to know more about them. So it isn't far-fetched for a mystic to tap into this sort of thing, allegedly. I believe there may be some sort of universal consciousness or memory that humans can tap into, sort of like the three-eyed raven in Game of Thrones. Something like that doesn't seem so far-fetched, especially now with scientists learning that the DNA, if you're familiar with DNA transcription, there are exons and introns, and correct me in the comments, but I believe the exons are what are actually transcribed into proteins and what have you via the DNA code. However, the rest, which makes up an astounding amount of genetic information, we don't know what it does. But we do know now that a single strand of DNA can store up to petabytes of information, and one such laboratory actually was able to store a very low resolution image on a strand of DNA. So who knows what could be stored? Things like trauma, generational traumas, curses, or even a universal memory bank. I believe this may be possible, though this is not medical advice. The 7 chakras, the 10 sephirot from the Torah, these centers of the body going all the way down from the anus to where the sacral chakra is, the genital organs, solar plexus, the stomach or gastrointestinal tract, the heart chakra, self-explanatory, throat chakra, third eye, and crown. They all correspond with physiological areas in the body, and I think the hypothesis is that you also, by way of your central nervous system, have a body of light, electromagnetic frequencies, that also has its own independent movement and abilities that you can access through it. I don't know this for sure, but I believe there's ample evidence to at least have a look at this and do some research into this, which I plan to once I have state verification, because I'm not getting locked up or called a pseudoscientist. I will not have that. This is all real scientific exploration. If these things are real, we should be able to find some sort of, I believe they're real. We should be able to find something to represent it in the physical plane, because this is a duality, the realm of duality. Everything in the spirit exists in the physical as well, so there should be a physical correlation. Now, here's where I want to bring things into modern day mysticism. You have your Reiki healers. Sure enough, you've heard of Reiki. It's a sort of energy healing that the practitioner does with their hand. And many of these practitioners are referred to as bodhisattva. These are people who they claim have been enlightened or have reached at least a higher plane of consciousness, which allows them to tune into some higher consciousness and be a liaison between a sick person and that higher consciousness so that they may heal. They say that Jesus was a bodhisattva. Any mystic you hear about in Eastern traditions would be called a bodhisattva. And they channel this thing which is called qigong, or orgone energy, which is the life force, the light body that is able to connect with the higher consciousness. I would love to speak with a Reiki healer. I have one woman in my cohort in my school who's a Reiki master, or says she is. I would like to talk with her more and see if she's down to come on this podcast and explain. But it's interesting when they talk about these Reiki healing sessions that the person is touched by the Reiki healer, which facilitates their ability to perceive a sort of higher consciousness, which then leads them to the root of their ailment. And it can be a very emotionally traumatic thing, because it's believed that each one of these maladies are actually manifestations of a spiritual trauma, maybe childhood or generational or otherwise, that they then must release, and there tends to be crying, crying and things, people getting really angry. I'm interested to see what this is. But for now, that is just speculation. I got to look into that process a little bit more. If you know more about it, let me know in the comments. If you think it's all hoopla and whoop-de-doo nonsense, pseudoscience nonsense, please let me know in the comments too. You're welcome here as well. But we got a news story. That might pose some questions. Here's one article I found on PubMed called "Synchronization of the Human Autonomic Nervous System Rhythms with Geomagnetic Activity in Human Subjects." And it's interesting because according to this article, a group of 10 individuals were found to have heart rate variability rhythms synchronized across a 31-day period at approximately 2.5 days. Even though all participants were in separate locations. Overall, this suggests that daily autonomic nervous system activity not only responds to changes in solar and geomagnetic activity, but is synchronized with the time-varying magnetic fields associated with geomagnetic field line resonances and Schumann resonances. And if you don't know what a Schumann resonance is, it's essentially a sort of radio frequency. Well, not sort of, that's exactly what it is. A radio frequency that emits from the ionosphere and is able to coordinate with our, according to this, heart rate variability. But in other articles I've read that it even may play a part in managing emotions. And much more may be on the horizon through research. But I think this is one bit of physical evidence, or at least an inkling of it, that we do have structures in the body, we do have a relationship with the heavens and the frequencies that emit from it. So in the case of enlightenment, I think one place to start is having a look at what is capable through the central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, peripheral nervous system in relation to the heavens. Solar phenomenon, geomagnetic phenomenon, maybe even astral phenomenon as well. Astronomic phenomenon, if you will. It's a juicy story, but I want to be careful and say in all this is not medical advice, and there's still much research to be done. So, in this episode, you may have noticed there have been a few technical difficulties, okay, with the sound and stuff. It's okay. It's fine. You can hear me talking. It's fine. It'll be better next episode. Don't worry about it. But it's interesting because I think, whatever you think about Reiki healing and all this stuff, it's goes back to what I was saying about the woman who she could only be healed if she believed in the power of Jesus. It's great that we have all these options available. And there are genuine groups of people going out to fortify this information. And as long as someone, if you go to see a medical doctor, this is not medical advice, but they'll likely tell you or point to whatever you're most comfortable with. I know I hear Dr. Mike say this a lot. He's an internet doctor. If you really want excuse me. If you really want to go do Reiki, then go do Reiki. And it just might help you. Even placebo alone is very powerful, but remember, this is not medical advice. I'd love to know what you think about it. I would like to speak to people on both sides of this conversation, not only those steeped in science and the scientific process, but as well as your Eastern mystics and who've seen these supernatural, quote-unquote, phenomenon firsthand, Reiki healers, Buddha, monks, and the sort. If you are one of those people, hit me up. Hit me up in my email, leave a comment, and leave a like. Subscribe. Ding, ding, ding-a-ling-ling. Ring that bell. So that you can get notifications of these episodes I release of Simply Naturopathic every week. Every week. Can you believe it? Every week. This is where you want to be because I'm the realest in the game in all of naturopathy. If you want to learn more about naturopathy, naturopathic medical school, and naturopathic doctors, check out my video about it. Should you go to naturopathic medical school? Also have some resources you can do to check out more information about naturopathic medical doctors who are board certified physicians, just as much as any other medical doctor is. Until the next episode of Simply Naturopathic.